Welcome to Mishna study, Masechet Demai, Perek Zayin, Mishna Zayin. Over here in this Mishnah, we're going to speak about if Tevel, right? So that's fruits that you didn't separate anything from, and regular fruits got mixed together, or Tevel and Maaser got mixed together, right? We're going to speak about all these few scenarios. It'll be a little complicated. We'll try to move through it. I'll try to do the best to explain of how you could go ahead and fix the problem. Now, just general rule before we start. We need to know that if tiruma falls into a pile of regular fruits, what happens to that pile, right? So general basics is, like how you usually have a concept of batil b'shishim, like if milk fell into, meat, we said if it's more than 1/60th, it's still kosher. When it comes to teruma, the law is 1 in 100. So if one piece of teruma fell into 100 pieces of chulin, then that would be okay. You just have to take one piece out, and everything's, you're allowed to eat those other 100. Right? Even though it got mixed up, you don't know which the one the teruma fell in. You could pick one out, and then you could have the rest. If one piece fell into 99, then the whole thing comes minduma. The whole thing becomes asur. You're not allowed to eat from it. Now, our Mishnah is not going to speak about directly teruma falling into cholin. It's going to talk about tevel that fell into cholin. Now you have to remember tevel. What's the law of tevel? Well, let's say he already separated his teruma, but he has other tevel. Part of it is terumat maaser. Is part of it. It's in there. It's within there because we didn't separate the ma'asrot yet. Now that fell into chulin. How do we view this? Do we view this as, do we view this as the one, right? 1% of the tevel, right, is still terumat ma'aser. So if you had 100 pieces of tevel that fell into 100 pieces of chulin, right? Do we view this as one terumat maaser fell into 100 chulin? And then we could fix the problem? Right? So our Mishnah is going to say yes. And we're going to do a few different scenarios like this. 4 scenarios. Let's go through them. Me'at tevel me'a chulin notel me'a ve'achat. Me'at tevel me'a maaser notel me'a ve'achat. Me'a chulin mitukanin me'a maaser notel me'a va'eser. מעט תבל 90 מעשר, 90 תבל 80 מעשר, לא יפסיד כלום. זה הכלל. כל זמן שהתבל מרובה, לא יפסיד כלום. So first case, right, I already gave the intro, that one teruma falls into 100, right? You're allowed to pick one piece out, and the rest is okay. Now, our case, over here that we're going to speak about firstly is when you have 100 pieces of tevel that falls into 100 pieces of chulin, regular fruits. Now together it totals 200 pieces of fruit. What could you do? So we say you're allowed to take out 101 pieces, right? You're basically taking out 100 pieces of tevel, plus we're going to take out one more piece that we're going to assume was the terumat maaser, right? You pull that out, you're left with 99 on the bottom. That was 99 of chulin, and that's what you could eat. Okay, good. Now, you may ask, you should ask, why don't we just take 100 out and you'll be left with 100 on the bottom, right? Because from the 100 that you're picking out of the tevel, one of those is terumat maaser, right? You don't need to take it out of the chulin portion. Just take the 100 out, and then you're left with 100 on the bottom. Why don't we take 101 out and be left with 99 on the bottom? So Rambam asked this question, and he says the point we do this is so everybody knows that when we took out the tevel. I need to know that we took out the tevel, and what's left is the chulin. So how do I represent that? By taking out one more. And by taking out one more, now I show that I took the tevel out and I took terumat maaser out, and everyone knows that the bottom portion is left as chulin, and you're left with 99. So what'd you lose out? Less than one piece. That's what you lost out on this whole mixture. Good. Second case. What's the second case in the Mishnah? So the second case is of 100 pieces of Tevel now fall into Maaser. Maaser Rishon. Right? You separated something for the Levi. He has a basket over here in your house. You have 100 pieces, of figs that are going to the Levi. And now you have 100 pieces of Tevel that just fell into this basket of Maaser. What do? So over here in this case, he takes 101 out again, but he recalls the 101 that he's taking out. He takes that as the Maaser, and he leaves the Tevel on the bottom. The 99 that's left on the bottom is Tevel. Now, why does he take out 101? Again, 100 he takes out as Maaser. And from the Tevel, he's taking also one more piece as Terumat Maaser that we're going to separate, as if it got mixed in, right? The Tevel got mixed in with the Maaser Rishon. So we're going to separate one more piece, separate that as Terumat Maaser over the Tevel. And what's left now on the bottom is 99 pieces of Tevel. Of course, he's going to have to take care of that afterwards and separate Terumat Maaserot as any Tevel would, but that's what's left on the bottom. Now, why do we take out the Maaser this time? Last time, right, we took the Tevel out of the Hulin. Why are we taking out the Maaser out of the Tevel? Why are we're taking 101? So over here, we're going to say the Maaser, right? Really, it was connected with the other Maaser, with the other Terumat Maaser. And now we need to take that out. That's why we've taken out 101. And what we're left on the bottom with is 99 pieces of Tevel. Okay, that's the second case. Let's move on now to the third case. Sorry, I should have flipped through a couple of slides over here, and you could have followed along. Now, the third case is when 100 pieces of Hulin Metukanim, we'll have to revisit why we're calling this Hulin Metukanim, mix into 100 pieces of Maaser. Okay, so 100 Hulin now fell into the Levi's Maaser. Now what do? You take out Me'ava Eser, you take out 110. Okay, so this is an interesting case. 100 Hulin fell into 100 Maaser. We're not taking out 101, we're taking out 110. Now why? Because the 100, okay, that's the Maaser that you need to take out, right? Maaser Rishon fell in, so we take out 100 pieces of Maaser. And now we also take out another 10. Why 10? So the 10 he's taking out is Terumat Maaser for the Maaser. So if 100 pieces, so first you take out the Maaser, 100 pieces. Then you have to take out another 10 pieces that represent the Terumat Maaser of the Maaser. Right? Remember, if Maaser is falling in, if it's 100 pieces of Maaser, the Terumat Maaser is 10% of that. Right? Terumat Maaser of Tevel, right, is 10% of 10%, so it ends up being 1 out of the 100. But Terumat Maaser of Maaser itself is 10% of the Maaser, that's 10 pieces. So to represent those 10 pieces, we're going to take out 10 for Terumat Maaser. So now you end up taking out 110 pieces. What are you left with on the bottom? 90. So you got shorted 10. Now, you're going to ask, why don't we just take out, 100? Why do I have to take out anything additional? If I separated the Maaser, the Terumat Maaser was mixed in with those. I took out 100, I'll be left with 100 on the bottom. So we can't do that over here. Why? Because we have a funny in-between state with this one. Why? Because if you think about it, we had 10 from the Maaser that got mixed in, right? If you think about it, what's the portion of Terumat Maaser that fell in to the Tevel? Sorry, that fell into the Hulin, right? Yeah. What percentage of Terumat Maaser fell into the Hulin? it was 10 pieces of Tirumat Maaser that fell into the 100 pieces of the Hulin. Now, usually we said, when is it Oleh? When do we say it's, Batel? When it's one that falls into 100. Over here, we had 10 pieces of Tirumat Maaser that fell into 100. That's a problem. We could say that the whole thing is Meduma, the whole thing is Asur, the whole bottom Hulin, we should wipe away. And over here, Mishna is saying, no, we don't do that because it's not exactly 10 pieces of Tirumat Maaser that fell in. That Tirumat Maaser, we didn't set aside as Tirumat Maaser. It's not actual Tirumah that fell in. I mean, if we separated it, it would have been, but we never separated Tirumah from the Maaser. So we view it as Maaser that fell in. So we're not going to go ahead and punish the person and say the whole thing's a wipeout. We do, but at the same time, right, we're not going to call it Miduma and wipe the whole thing out. But at the same time, we can't say that it's Oleh because it's the wrong proportion, it's the wrong ratio. So over here we have a compromise in our Mishnah, and it basically gives us and tells us, what you do, take out 110. Take out 100 for the Maaser, another 10, which represent the Tirumat Maaser, and you're left with 90 on the bottom, 90 Hulin, and you could go ahead and eat that. That's the third case. Now, parenthetically, Rambam asks over here, why are we calling this Hulin Metukanim? The first language of the Mishnah, we had 100 Tevel and 100 Hulin. Over here, we're saying 100 Hulin Metukanim and 100 Maaser. Well, use the same language. Is it Hulin? What's the difference between Hulin and Hulin Metukanim? So Rambam says, first of all, Hulin, when we say Hulin, anytime we say Hulin, it's talking about when you separated Tirumah. You separated the main things that right now it's edible, right? There's no Chiyuv Mita involved, it's edible now. You took away Tirumah, you separated Tirumat Maaser, right? It's edible now. When we say Hulin Metukanim, it's fixed, it's perfect, right? That is when you separated all the Tirumot and all the Maaserot. You even separated Maaser Yishon, Maaser Sheni. You separated everything that's necessary. And over here, there's an extra Hidush now, Mishnah, that even if it was Hulin Metukanim, right, that you already separated all the Maaserot from, even so, you have to separate 110, right? If it only would have said Hulin, it would have been less of a Hidush. Because I would have said, oh, it's Hulin. There was still Maaser in the Hulin. He didn't fully separate the Maaserot from it. So there was some Maaser in there. It got mixed in with the other Maaser. That's why we're going to have to take out 110, right? Because the Hulin had 10 Maaser mixed in with it. So you'd separate the Maaser 100 plus another 10 from the Hulin, the Maaser from the Hulin, which is another 10. That's how you get to the number 110. And Rambam says over here, there's an extra Hidush. Even if it was Hulin Metukanim, well, you separated all the Tirumot and Maaserot from it. If Maaser fell into that, you still have to remove 110, and 100 is not enough. That's a nice Hidush of Rambam over here. Now, let's move on to the fourth case. Sorry, I haven't been so diligent with the moving of the slides over here. I'm mostly reading from the book in front of me. So now, if we move on to the fourth case, what's the fourth case? If you have 100 Tevel and 90 Maaser. Over here, you have more Tevel than Maaser. Okay, so now, what's the case? You have 100 Tevel. That means you can have, if you're looking at the Tirumat Maaser over here, right? You have one piece of Tirumat Maaser from the Tevel that fell into 90. What happens in 1 in 90? 1 in 90 is not necessarily good, right? It should technically be, a wipeout. If it was real Tirumah that fell into 90, that would be a wipeout, and you have to throw, the whole thing becomes Tirumah, right? But over here, it's not, one that fell into 90 per se, right? All of the Tevel fell in. He didn't separate that Tirumat Maaser yet. So he had one that fell into the 90. We're going to say, or 90 Tevel that fell into 80, right? Same idea, right? Lo hifsid kilu. He didn't miss out on anything, right? What does this mean? The 100 Tevel stays as is. He just takes out the 90 Maaser and he's good. he's good. He's left with 100 Tevel. He doesn't lose anything, right? The first case in the Mishnah, we had to take out an extra one to represent the Terumat Maaser. But over here, we're not taking out an extra one to represent the Terumat Maaser. Why? Because if we took out an extra one to represent the Terumat Maaser, we would be showing that one fell into 90. And we can't do that, because if one falls into 90, the whole thing's a wipeout. The whole thing becomes Terumah. So we don't want to show that it's actual Terumat Maaser that fell in. So what do? We just separate the 90 off. You're left with 100 Tevel, and you move on. Now, the Mishnah bottom lines it, and he says, Zakla. This is the rule. Kol zeman shatevel merubeh. Any time that you have more tevel, right? More tevel than the maaser, right? What do? You separate it as is. There's no loss. You just separate the maaser off. You're left with the exact amount of tevel that you had. But let's say you had more maaser. Let's say it was vice versa. You had 100 maaser that fell into 90 tevel. Right? Over here, the Yerushalmi explains that you need to take out the tevel and the shiur of Terumat Maaser for that tevel. Right? And for the Maaser itself as well. So you end up separating 2 Terumot for the Kohen. So what would you end up doing? You'd end up separating 90 tevel, plus you'd separate also the Terumat Maaser involved over here. And Harambam ends off this Perush, and he says, Vani savur shalacha zo kvar nitbara v'huvharu inyanea. I explained everything. I went out of my way, I explained it in detail. Veitbonen ba, pay attention to it. Ki hayta hatuma bifnei kol harishonim sheyadanu. Because all the Rishonim, everyone that preceded, it was really this, it was under lock. People couldn't understand it. And I have now opened up this Mishnah for you to understand. I hope I explained it well. If not, you can read it inside and appreciate this Mishnah and what Harambam does to this Mishnah in his explanation. We have one more Mishnah left to Masechet Demai.